Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I am doing my December wrap-up. Happy New Year, everyone! This is my first video of the new year being filmed on January 1st. I think my evolution of a reader video will actually be the first video that goes up, but I did film that last year. Anyway, I read 9 books for December, and I'm pretty pleased with myself. I feel like I went out on a bang because almost everything that I read I liked. So let's jump right into it. So first up was a reread. Most of these are rereads. I think there's only like 3 new reads in here. And I had no plans to read this book in December, but Magical Emma Rose, who I will link down below, mentioned this in one of her cozy fantasy reads videos, and it is my favorite children's book ever, and I wanted to reread it, and I really needed this to kind of reset myself after having kind of a bit of a slumpy month last month where I was just getting burned out. This is The Ordinary Princess by M.M.K. This is a middle grade book about a princess named Amy who is gifted or cursed, depending on how you look at it, with ordinariness when she is born. So instead of being the beautiful, blonde, perfect princess, she is just a plain-looking girl. And she ends up running away from home because her parents are having trouble getting her married off, and they want to lock her in a tower and have a dragon ravage the land. And she thinks that's a ridiculous idea. So she runs away from home, and this is the story of her adventures. I adore this book. I first read it when I was a child, getting it out of the library at my grandparents' lake house, and I would get it out over and over again and read it over and over again. And I only recently, as an adult, bought my own copy. And I just love this. I had so much fun rereading it. I spent one evening, it took me a few hours, and it was just lovely and the perfect reset that I needed. Naturally, I gave this 5 stars. Next up, we went back to my actual TBR for the month. This is the selected poems of Percy Shelley. So I read this for my exams. I had only read one other Percy Shelley poem. It was Ozymandias, which is in here. I gave this 3 stars. It was just kind of meh on Shelley. I don't even remember most of these. I just know a lot of them were really long, and I don't think I really particularly liked any of them. Or maybe there was a few, I can't even remember. A few of his short love poems were nice, but mostly these were just too long for me, and I wasn't into it at all. Just not at all. Next up was by a Shelley that I liked much better. This was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I was rereading this both for my exams and also because I am teaching it right at the beginning, well, not right at the beginning of the year, but in February of the next semester for my Brit Lit class. So I wanted to reread it and kind of refamiliarize myself with it because I don't remember a whole lot from the first time I read it. And I thought I had only rated it 3 stars when I read it last, but I apparently gave it 4 on Goodreads, so maybe I'm losing my mind. That's not the only book this happened with this month. I don't know. Anyway, I loved this time around. I just loved Shelley's writing. I really enjoyed the scariness of the first part of the book. I think a lot of times when we think of the real Frankenstein as opposed to the movie versions, it's a lot less horror. But when Victor first sees the monster, that is really scary. And then when he wakes up and sees him there, that is terrifying as well. I was just like, ooh. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing how Shelley uses Milton's Paradise Lost in this, which I have very recently read for class. And yeah, I just thought this was overall great, well written, enjoyable. Victor Frankenstein is like the whiniest, most horrible character ever. Like, you are such... Most of this book was me being like, oh my god, you are the most obnoxious person in the world. You're awful. Why are you so awful? I know I'm not the only one who has that reaction to him, but I don't mind unlikable characters. And he was unlikable in a way that made the book enjoyable for me, kind of in the same way that Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights does with its plethora of unlikable characters. So I gave this 4 stars. Next up, we have another reread, and this was not as successful as some of the other rereads of this month. This is Gender Trouble by Judith Butler. I read this last year for my feminist theory class, and it was on my worst books of the year list. And I only read it because it's on, only reread it because it is on my exam list, and I couldn't remember anything meaningful from it, so I reread it to get some quotes, because it's gonna look odd if I don't bring up Gender Trouble on my exam. But yeah, I still found it pretty incomprehensible, didn't like it, kept my rating of 2 stars. Next up is the only novel that was not a reread for me. This is Thelma by Marie Corelli. This was also for my exam list, and I ended up really enjoying this, despite the absolute horrificness of this copy. Reading this was so hard. I would be on my couch, like, with it up super close to my face because I couldn't see the print because it's just so small and the book is so large. But anyway, Thelma is the story of Sir Philip Errington. Now I can't remember anyone's name. I'm pretty sure it's Errington, who is on his yacht in Norway with some friends. He is from the upper class of England, and he meets this Norwegian woman, Thelma, and he falls in love with her. And this is the story of them getting together and their early marriage and kind of working through the difficulties of bringing Thelma, who is from rural Norway, into upper class British society, and how that tests their relationship. I just thought this was so fun. I had a good time, you know? Like, was it the best work of literature in the world? No, probably not. But the story was interesting. I really cared about the characters, and it was just fun. It was fun, and that's kind of what I like. Fun. Next up was more poetry. This is the Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Other Poems by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. I had read the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and that was the only one by Coleridge I had read. I loved the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Great poem. Still thought it was a great poem this time around. I also ended up really loving Christabel, and I would love to have some words with Coleridge over the fact that it is unfinished because, sir, I got incredibly invested in that story, and I want to know how it ends. Rude. Absolutely rude. Ugh. The other ones I thought were pretty good as well. I don't remember a whole lot of the other ones. Let me find the table of contents. Those are the only 2 that were really super memorable to me, but they were so good that I gave this collection 4 stars. Next up is another novel that I reread because I am teaching it, and boy did this have a turnaround for me. Okay, so I have to eat my words here because I have for years been saying I don't like Virginia Woolf's fiction. I don't find it very impressive. It just doesn't do anything for me. And then I reread Mrs. Dalloway because I decided I'm teaching it for my modernist unit. Even though I only gave it 2 stars the first time I read it, but I was like, I need a short book and I need one that is going to display stream of consciousness, trauma from World War I, and sexuality and a few other things. And Mrs. Dalloway has all that, so I was like, well, it's Mrs. Dalloway, we're doing it. Okay, I'll reread it and hopefully like it better. 4.5 stars. I loved this. I don't know what I was doing the first time I read it. I wasn't even that young. I think I was like 23 or 24. I read it in 2017. I can't do math. So it just wasn't the right time for me to read it. I know I read it in about 2 days the last time, whereas I spent 6 days with it this time. And I really slowed down and like looked at her sentences and her language and her words and how she was constructing everything. And I was just so blown away with the beauty of it. I loved this. Honestly, I debated very long and hard, was this a 5-star read for me? And I just ultimately decided on no. And that is really just because I'm too Victorian. Like, I loved the language. I thought it was beautiful, but it's so experimental in structure and so far away from the traditional Victorian novel that there was still something with me that was uncomfortable with it. And so it wasn't quite a 5-star, but it was very, very close. So I am now so looking forward to reading the rest of Virginia Woolf's work. And my apologies to Virginia Woolf for thinking that I hated her for so long. Wow. Next up is another novel that I reread to teach. This is Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. I am doing this with my postmodernist unit because we are also doing Jane Eyre for the Victorian unit. So I loved this once again, although apparently I gave this 3 stars instead of what I thought was 4 when I first read it, even though I remember really liking it. I don't know what past me was doing. So this is the second time that's happened. There's going to be one more. But I loved this time around. This is a retelling of Jane Eyre from Bertha's perspective, who is Antoinette in this. Antoinette, it's showing her childhood and how she came to marry Mr. Rochester, who remains nameless through the whole book. And it is, again, a very modern book, very structurally, Rhys is playing with structure a lot. She's playing with different narrative voices. She's playing with memory and time and all kinds of stuff. And I just really enjoyed it. I can't wait to see what my students think of it. Same with Mrs. Dalloway. I cannot wait to see what my students think of it. I gave this 4 stars, and I don't know why I gave it 3 the original time I read it, because I liked it and even wrote a paper on it. Past me, what are you doing? And now we have one that I didn't read in full, but I read partly, and I still want to include it. This is The Pre-Raphaelites from Rossetti to Ruskin, a poetry collection of the Pre-Raphaelites, obviously. I was reading Dante, Gabriel Rossetti, and Christina Rossetti's poetry. I love Christina Rossetti so much. I love her so much. Rereading Goblin Market, just reading everything by her. In an Artist Studio, great poem. I'm teaching that one to my students in conjunction with Dante, Gabriel Rossetti's 2 poems titled Portrait, I believe. Possibly The Portrait, but The Portrait, which is a sonnet in the House of Life, and then another poem called The Portrait. Dante, Gabriel Rossetti. Be more creative. Anyway, loved Christina Rossetti's poems. Had such a good time with them. Was not really loving Dante, Gabriel Rossetti's poems. I was just, like, there were several times where I just was like, that doesn't rhyme. And like, I'm not a poetry person. I know poetry doesn't always have to rhyme, but it was like, it looked like it was supposed to rhyme and it just didn't, and it sounded bad and it made me angry. Also, he's just such a man. Such a man. And I kind of enjoy how his sister is calling him out in her poem in an artist studio. And so I'm really excited to teach those to my students and have them looking at some of the paintings. And I'm having one student give a presentation on Lizzie Siddall, who I believe was Rossetti's wife, and who was the pre-Raphaelite model for a lot of famous paintings, including Millet's Ophelia and Waterhouse's Lady of Shalott. And she was also a poet herself. So I can't wait to teach that unit, but I was not a big fan of Dante Gabriel Rossetti's poetry. All right, and then the last book of the month was a play. This is Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. I read this in my Brit Lit class back in my undergrad and adored it. Thought I'd given it 5 stars, apparently only gave it 4. Don't know why. Pass to me. What are you doing? I reread this in 2 days, and this is a 5-star read from me. It's set in dual timelines, 1809, I believe, and then present day. The 1809 plot focuses on the family, the Coverleys, their daughter Thomasina, who's a young genius with math, and her tutor Septimus, whose friend Lord Byron is visiting, and there are things happening. And then in the present, 2 scholars are trying to piece together these things that happened while also interacting with the family of the house, who are still the Coverleys. I love how this plays with time. I had the pleasure of seeing this performed. So we read this at the beginning of my Brit Lit class, and then luckily the college in the next town over was performing it, and we got to go see it at the end of the year. So that was just so great. I am in the process of trying to find a filmed performance for my students to watch. Hopefully Yale Repertory Theater will email me back and let me know if their 2014 production was filmed and if I can have access to that, because you really do need to see this to truly appreciate it. But it is just so great. And that is my December wrap up. Tell me down in the comments below, what did you read this month? Have you read any of these before? If you did, what did you think? It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.